Hello, everyone. Now we're on the second part in our series on working with your first DA. So in our first screencast, we opened the DA from the common folder, saved our own copy into the submit folder inside our home directory, and knitted it up for the first time so that we could read it easily. Now, here we are back on RStudio. And currently, my files pane has got me looking into the submit directory in my home folder. You'll notice that in addition to the source document, the .rmd, our markdown document that makes our DA, there's also something with the same file name, .html, and that's that web page that we viewed in the viewer and that we popped up big also in our browser. So we could always have a look at that again simply by, opening it in the web browser. Okay, let's take a look into the DA and begin to do some things with it. So head up to the upper left-hand corner to the buffer for your DA, and you're going to see what we call YAML front matter that I've got highlighted there. It always starts at the beginning of an R Markdown document. There's 3 hyphens for the beginning of it on line 1 here. There's 3 hyphens for the end of it later on. That delimits the YAML front matter from the rest of the document. Now, the YAML front matter is mostly technical stuff. One important technical bit is the output that tells the server when you knit the document how exactly to make this into a web page and what it ought to look like, what the style ought to be, and so on. And part of that is getting a table of contents set up, and that's what that TOC depth is all about. That's going to be material that you're never going to touch, okay? Also, the line 4 on date, that actually just makes it so that when you knit it up, the exact day that you did the knitting will be shown in the document. You won't need to touch that. Title, you usually are not going to have to touch. But author, I'd like you to touch. So look at the author fields. Author, and then a colon, and then a space, and then some stuff in quotes. And right now it just says your name here. Well, let's say I'm doing the homework. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select and then backspace the your name here, leaving the quotes, leaving the opening and the closing quotes. And then I'm going to type in my name. Okay, Homer White. Now, I've made a change to the source document. The buffer shows a change. And you can tell that because of the asterisk after the RMD at the end of my my title. I've got some unsaved changes, okay? So those changes won't be reflected in anything that an instructor could later pick up. The instructor can't see your buffer. They can only see what's in the file. So you would need to save those changes. You could save them later, but let's go ahead and practice saving it now. So one way to save is just go to File, Save. Another way to save is to use the keyboard shortcut, which is going to be a Control-S if you're on Windows or a Command-S if you're on Mac like I am. I'm on Mac, I'm doing Command-S. And as soon as I save, then the asterisk goes away. That change is now in that file. Okay, so I could see, if I were to collect your homework now, I could see that you would put your name in it. Let's check on the effect. Let's knit this document again. So I've now changed the HTML file in my submit folder. And you can't quite see it here, but if you were to just look at the hamburger, you'll see that the author has been changed to Homer White. Okay. Next up, let me get my face out of the way. Why don't we start reading the DA here and just see what they would like us to do. Let's see, there seems to be an introductory section. Attach packages. For this lab, you're going to need to make sure that package TigerStats is attached. And you do that with library tiger stats as we learned in the slides. So let me make sure that that's true. I'll just go ahead and run that command again. When you attach a package, it's going to stay attached all semester long as you're in the same R session. And so, this command is probably going to be superfluous, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I typed in library tiger stats into the console and ran it. Okay. Let's head to some questions. First question. So your questions that you need to answer are always got that tan background. Can you use R like a calculator? And it looks like there's this second field with kind of a brownish background where you're supposed to put in your answer. Okay, let me first think. Can I use R like a calculator? Thinking back to the slides, yeah, sure. We did some examples of using it like a calculator. So the answer is going to be yes. I need to figure out where to put this answer. So head over to your buffer and let's find that part of the assignment. So as we scroll down past the YAML front matter, we get some this is called CSS, cascading style sheets. It's an HTML type. It's a web page type of thing, and it's actually determining the styling of that document as it appears to you. The backgrounds of things being the tan or the red or whatever. And so that's stuff that you're never going to touch. You can just scroll right past that. Next is what we call a code chunk. It has kind of a gray background. And that first code chunk, you're never going to touch. Don't worry about it. Next is what appears to be that first section, about attaching packages with that little code chunk, library tiger stats. And then the section on arithmetic. These hashtags here, like those two hashtags on my line 51, they make a section called arithmetic. And then underneath it is 3 hashtags. That's making a subsection that's my first question. R is a calculator. This little question stuff after it is just helping the styling go along. Don't touch it. Can you use R like a calculator? You don't put your answer there. You head down to the answer subsection where it says replace this text with your answer. So I'm just going to select that capitalized stuff, backspace to delete it, and I'm going to say, yes, you can use R like a calculator. In fact, it looks like I'm going to have to use it like a calculator soon, because when I'm looking down at some of these other questions, I can see it's asking me to do some math. So you can just type in regular text. It's just like typing, that part is like typing into a regular Word document. When you type in an answer, make sure that there is a blank line after the section heading and before your text. And then make sure there is another blank line before the end of the section. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Make sure there's another blank line before the end of the section. If you don't have some of those blank lines, then when you knit the document up, it won't look right. In fact, I'm just going to illustrate that now, so don't ever do this, but I'm just going to remove that blank line, and now I'm going to knit the document again, and you're going to see something a little bit off. Yeah, so checking down here in the knitted output, you can see I've got my question, I got my answer, but somehow these hashtags got like thrown into the answer, and that's weird. So we don't want that. We want the blank line, and we're going to knit again. Oh, and by the way, whenever you knit, your change is automatically saved. See, look, right now I've got an unsaved change. See the asterisk? I've added in that blank line. It's only in the buffer. It's not in the file. But when I knit, that's automatically saving. So knitting your work frequently to check and see how it looks is also saving your work. You want to save all the time. Now it looks good, and we're ready to move on to the next question. Hey, moving on to questions, looking around. We've been scrolling up and down, in order to find stuff, and that's fine. But in a longer document, when you scroll, it can sometimes be a little bit hard to find the place you're looking for. After all, these source or markdown documents, it's weird text. It's a little confusing. It's not a what you see is what you get system like Word. So you might want another way to navigate around sometimes in an R markdown document, and there is a way. See where I'm waving my mouse down at the bottom of this buffer? There's a little kind of like up and down arrows. Just kind of click there. There's a little table of contents for your R markdown document that's determined by those hashtags and 2 and 3 hashtag system. So you can actually head down to like what you want to go to, which is the first question. Let me see, we've done the R as a calculator. How about the question sum arithmetic? And it pops right to that place. So what's this next question? In the code chunk below, write the code needed to compute 50 times 1.5. And now the way that's written in the R markdown document, it looks funny with the dollar signs and the backslash times. That's what we call LaTeX. It's the way we write up math. And you don't have to learn any LaTeX in this course. But you still want to know like what it is, the math that you're supposed to try to do. Now, notice that if you hover near one of these things, you might get RStudio to show you how the math is supposed to look, 50 times 1.5, like I've got there on my screen. But if that doesn't happen for you, don't worry. You can just always go to the HTML over here in the viewer, and you can look for the question, and you'll see how the math looks. 50 times 1.5. Okay. I'm supposed to write the code to compute that in the code chunk below. What's this code chunk thing? Well, checking down in the answer section, we see a code chunk. A code chunk is stuff with a gray background. And it starts off with 3 hashtags. You see, 3 backticks. You see those 3 backticks? And then there's an R in braces that just says, hey, R code is coming up. And then at the end of the code chunk, there's 3 backticks. Those 3 backticks are super important. They make the code chunk. They delimit the code chunk from the regular text in the rest of the R markdown document. We need to put in this code chunk the code needed to compute 50 times 1.5. So what I'm going to do is just replace this entire line, including those double hashtags. Now, sorry folks, this is a little confusing at this stage. Those double hashtags inside a code chunk, they don't mean sections and subsections. They mean a comment. They mean stuff that's not really our code, that's just there to help explain code. And you're going to want to delete that entire comment, including the hashtags. And then you put in what you need, 50 asterisk 1.5. And that should do it. Let's just see if it's going to compute 50 times 1.5. How can you tell? Well, if you go to the little triangle in the upper right-hand corner of the code chunk, you hover on it and it says Run Current Chunk. So if I press that, let's do it. Then it runs the R code in that chunk and shows you the output, not in the console, but right there in the R markdown document, and it's 75 and it looks okay. If you don't want to see that output, you could go to the little X in the upper right-hand corner where it says Clear Output, and then it'll go away. Now, we've answered that question. Let's see how our answer looks when we knit it up. So we're going to knit this document. That'll save any unsaved changes that we've made. We'll wait for a moment while it knits. And looking into the R markdown document here in the viewer, well, hey, the The result of 50 times 1.5 is shown as output. So this is how code chunks work. When the document is knit up, the code inside those chunks is actually run, and the result of the code is stuck into the knitted document. So you don't ever actually have to run the code in an R Markdown document. When you knit it, it gets run, and the output is shown. Running it here in the R Markdown document is just a way of checking to make sure that it's really doing what you'd like it to do before you do it. But it's really not necessary. Okay. Before we move on to the next question, let me just show you a little thing you need to be careful about when you're working with R Markdown. Those 3 backticks at the beginning and at the end that delimit the code chunk from the rest of the R Markdown document are super important. What would happen if I just accidentally deleted one of them? Then all of a sudden, RStudio gets really confused about where the code chunk is supposed to start and stop. And it ends up thinking the code chunk goes all the way down, like way down into like a code chunk way down further in the document. And that's really weird. And so when your gray background appears to be like out of place like that, then that's a sign to look and see if maybe you've mangled the code chunk by taking out a backtick. I'm going to put that backtick in. And now the gray background's where it ought to be. What would happen if I accidentally knocked off one of those code chunks and one of those backticks? Now it doesn't even think the code chunk has started. And so you'll notice not only is there no gray background, but there's that little button to push to run the code chunk is gone, stuff like that. So, when you see weird things happening like that, look to see if you have mangled the code chunk and then make sure you've got 3 backticks, braces R, and then 3 backticks at the end. Okay, let's head to the next question. I always like to read my questions from the HTML viewer first, then head into the R Markdown document and think about answering it. Question, more arithmetic. In the code chunk below, write the code needed to compute this math, which is a big complex fraction. Oh, let me review how to do that. Let me go back to our slides and just navigate over to using R like a calculator. And I look at like slide 6 and see how to get square roots. Study that for a bit. Oh, multi-step arithmetic. There's a problem really similar to this one. And you see that you can answer it by using parentheses and the square root function in the right way. Okay, and going on further, it teaches you how you could just break the computation up into little pieces, like maybe the numerator and the denominator. And so you study these things and then decide on how you're going to answer the question. You head back to RStudio and let's find the answer field. There it is. Replace this with your codes right underneath all that math for the complex fraction. And so I'm going to give this a try. I think I need a little bit more space. I kind of want to work in that math right here with this code. And just to make sure I have enough space, I'm going to give myself a little bit more space. There we go. All right, let me give this a try. So I totally get rid of that comment. And then parenthesis 105.9 minus 100, close parenthesis, / for divide, squirt, the 22 divided by the 71. You got those close parentheses. Hey, let me check and see if that gives me a sensible number. Okay, I get a number. I'll just kind of empty that out. And so that's one way to do it. That's just one way. And let me just go ahead and do 2 ways, just for fun. I mean, you get full credit if you just had this one way. But I'm the teacher. I like to show more than one way. And I also want to show you how you can put in more stuff than just putting into a code chunk. So one thing you can do is you can explain what you're about to do in some regular text. I just created some blank lines, and I'll say, here is one way, colon. Okay. And then at the end of the next code chunk, I'm going to space down a couple, create nice blank lines. Always have a blank line before a thing and a blank line after a thing when you're working with an R markdown document. And then you can say, like, here is another way. And what you want to do is put in another code chunk. Is there a way to put in a code chunk? Yeah. When you go to insert, where I'm waving my mouse, if you ask to insert R, then that inserts all of an R code chunk for you. You don't have to type in all those backends. And then let's try something. How about, I don't know, the top shall be the 105.9 minus the 100. The bottom shall be, using the assignment operator like in the slides, a squirt of, I'm a lazy guy. I'm going to go take this stuff that I already typed, copy it, and paste it. Yeah. And then, how about, this is fun. Let's see if we can do like the whole thing is the top, using the code completion, divided by the bottom, use code completion again. And let's see how this is looking for us. So why don't we just like run these 3 lines code, and gee, looks like nothing happened. The reason it looks like nothing happened is all that we did was assign values to names. If you go and just like click on the environment part of your tab, you actually see 3 things in your global environment: the top, the bottom, and the whole thing. When you're working inside your R Markdown document like this, running code chunks, you're working in your R session. And so you may be putting some things in your global environment. So it's all there. You've done stuff. The problem is you didn't actually like display the answer. So you can fix that. All you got to do is put whole thing as the last thing in your code chunk, and then it'll print it out in the output. Let's run this code chunk again and see. That's working. Great. Okay, so I feel like we've answered the question a couple of different ways. Why don't we check now to knit it up? That's going to save our answers, super important, and also give us a chance to make sure that we didn't mangle our R Markdown document to make the output look bad. Oh, here we are in the viewer again, and here's one way, here's another way. That just looks great. Side note, these 2 hashtags, they don't mean sections in an R Markdown document. They don't mean comments like in R code comments. They mean this is what would show up in the console if you were running these commands down here, in the console. If I were running those commands down in the console directly, that's what would show up. In fact, when you're working in your R Markdown document and running code chunks, look at that code. It's being run down here in the console along with it. It's linked to your R session. Okay, let's head on to the next question. Again, we'll read it from the HTML document. Question, another fill color. In the slides, you saw how to make bar graph of the seating preference for the 71 students in the M1 survey data. In the code chunk below, I better fix those typos. Write the code needed to produce a bar graph of the same data using a fill color of your own choosing. Okay, I'll fix those typos by the time you're working with this document. Note, you must choose a color different from the one used in the slides. Great time to review the slides. Fun with the graph. So again, you would kind of just go over, you might even look back in the screencast, to remind yourself more of what everything's about. But after you review, you'll realize that, this code here is how you make a bar graph, and the fill is what you vary to get your different colors, and you can find your list of colors from the colors function. Okay, so that gives an idea how to proceed. I'm going to copy that entire code all the way down to the closing parentheses, Let's see, copy. Head back to our studio. And find the place where I need to stick that code. Delete the comment. Control V for a paste. And all I got to do is select a different color. Not the burley wood, not the sky blue from the slides. Need a different color. Now, of course, you could just be conservative and guess that blue is one of the colors. Let's see if that comes out okay. Ugh, a little bit loud. You can probably make a guess of a lot of other colors. But you could also just like run colors, parentheses, down here in the console. And then you can scroll through and like pick one of these colors. Tell you what, I'm going to go with tomato 3. And so notice how your color is in quotes. So when you modify this, keep those quotes. Tomato 3. And now let's give it a try. Not as loud. And it's enough for me. All right, let's knit this up and see how it's going to look. Scroll down. Oh, it looks okay. Let's pop it up big. See if it still looks okay, and it's a quite big version. Look at the table of contents. Love using the table of contents. Very important for longer DAs. Okay. Well, after checking things through and seeing if like you've got your name, yeah, you got your name. Does everything look right? Do all the sections look right and unmangled? Once everything looks right, you've knitted up that one last time, made that final check, then you know that you have saved the final version into the submit folder, the version that you want to have graded. So if I click here on files, notice that our markdown document here, the second one there, that's the one where your instructor is going to come pick up a copy of that, or well, look at that document, make a copy, and grade off of that copy. So you always want to make sure that file in your submit folder really has all the changes you ever made up here in this buffer before the deadline for collection. Okay, you've done a DA. That's enough work for today. In our next screencast, we'll talk about how to look at a DA that's been returned to you. See you later.